Hey guys, welcome back to the Jay's Fit Down podcast. I'm your host, Jane Gain. Today I'm here with Cole Cubelic here of ESPN, covers college football for ESPN. Thank you. Glad to have him on the show to talk some football with us, Cole. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Cool, man. I appreciate being with you, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. So Cole, you see it up close. You cover college football. So, SEC recently announced, they're going to stick with the 8-game schedule, of course, and then obviously including Texas and Oklahoma into the conference as well. I just want to get your thoughts, man, opening up, and not just in the SEC, but other the conferences as well. These teams going around, moving around. What are your thoughts on that, man?
Yeah, we don't really know where we're headed, and I don't know if we're ever going to truly get to a stopping point where everybody just kind of sits back and says, all right, this is it. This is what college football is going to look like for the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. It's still morphing, still changing. We've seen, 2 or 3 of the biggest shifts in college football in the history of the game in the last 3 years. So it's very different as far as the SEC staying at 8. I think that's just a one-year stopgap. I think when you go to 2025, it'll go to 9 games. Could there be more money from ESPN? Yeah, your inventory increases. It's better inventory. So probably the schools want a little bit more money if they're going to go play that game. But I just think some of the reasoning that was given on, what's the playoff going to do? Whatever way we dictated a national champion, be it the Associated Press, coaches poll, BCS, 14 playoff, strength of schedules always mattered. So you shouldn't have to sit around and wait on somebody to tell you that. But the SEC's had a lot of success with an 8-game schedule, winning national championships. I do think it goes away, though, because I think it's more valuable to play the entities inside your league now that you would have that many moving forward. So it will shift there. As far as just the overall landscape, there's going to be more of it. I mean, Brett Yormark's extremely aggressive with the Big 12 right now. George Kliavkoff feels like he's kind of holding on for dear life with the Pac-12. And, the Big Ten and the SEC feel like they're kind of just walking away from everybody. Where do they want to be when they finally do that? I don't really know, but it feels inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I just think it's really, like you said, we're going to a new direction right now. And, like I said, obviously, Oklahoma and Texas, of course, they're coming into the SEC. How do you think that's going to be? Are you a fan of that, them coming in? What are your thoughts on those two coming into the
Well, I'm a fan of those two brands. I mean, I think they're two of the most iconic brands in college football. So you do strengthen the league, and you don't just strengthen the league in football. You strengthen the league in basketball. You strengthen the league in softball, in baseball, in gymnastics, in basketball. Those two universities are elite in multiple sports. So you strengthen the league across the entire calendar year. And you expand the footprint a little bit. Like, yes, Texas A&M is there, but you get a more stronghold of Texas, which is going to bring a ton of eyeballs. And you move to Oklahoma City. Obviously Oklahoma's in Norman, but you'll pull Oklahoma City in, which is one of the major markets in this country. So it's brilliant for a lot of different reasons. And then you have the Cotton Bowl, the Red River rivalry, Red River shootout, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be played there every year, which is another one of the massive rivalry games in college football. So it's pretty cool to see that Texas A&M probably coming back, that Texas Oklahoma is going to be a part of the SEC. I'm excited to go to those places, cover those games, and it's going to make it a lot more fun, a lot more interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Now you had your Power 5, right? We all know the Power 5, the schools and everything. But now with the shifting of the schools, do you think that name, that kind of I guess you would say that association, that title kind of dissipates a little bit? Because now, like, you got other conferences. Do you think other conferences could, potentially rise up and become, and compete?
Catch the SEC? No, I don't think so. The Big Ten's close. The Big Ten's got some serious power brokers, but the ACC just hasn't really lived up to their potential the last couple of seasons. Florida State looks like they're coming back. Miami looked like they were didn't go great last year. We know where Clemson is. This is a very interesting year for Clemson. If they begin to slip even more, then I think you have to start looking at some of the recruiting strategy through the portal, things like that. And then just having generational quarterbacks. And if you don't, what is it going to be? Obviously, like I said, the Big 12 done a good job expanding and adding brands. But if you're just talking overall power of brands and what you're going to be able to command, it's just not going to be close. And I just don't really see a way the Pac-12 is able to hang on moving forward. because there will be another round of expansion in my mind, and there are schools there that are going to get taken. And, obviously the Big Ten's already shown you that they geographically, they don't really care about the footprint. They'll go anywhere, so it doesn't matter. I don't see anybody passing or really catching the SEC. Big Ten's close, and those are the two brands that are probably going to separate themselves from everything else once it's all said and done.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you there. I think the SEC, like they say, it just means more, right?
Absolutely.
So, it's nothing like SEC football. So on that note, just staying in that realm, man, real quick, Georgia, obviously, you back to back, we don't know what the deal with Alabama is. So, what are your, as far as who you think is going to come out the SEC this year? You think Georgia's can repeat again? You think Alabama can get back on the horse? What are your thoughts there?
No, I think Georgia should be the favorite. I think Georgia is the favorite, not only in the SEC, but to win a national championship. And it's just that they deserve that credit. They deserve that recognition based on how Kirby's built it and the amount of talent that's going to be back. You look at that receiving core, it doesn't really get enough credit, especially adding Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett. You got Brock Bowers at tight end. The offensive line with Stacey Searles coaching that group up. They were runner-up for the Joe Moore Award last year. They'll be in the mix for that again this year. The defensive line will be elite. So it's I think they could be a little bit different than they were a year ago, where I don't think Stetson Bennett gets enough credit for the playmaker that he was and how versatile Coach Monken was as a play caller. But with that schedule, they got a long time to figure things out. And they'll be a very different team week 10 than they are week 1 or 2. And then I think by the time we get to the postseason, there will probably be no doubt that they are one of the 2-3 best teams in college football. I think LSU and Alabama are both very interesting in the West. There's a lot more to like about Alabama than a lot of people discuss on a regular basis. You got a JUCO transfer coming in at receiver that I think people have kind of forgotten about. I think there are some running backs, even though they're deep at that position, that could have an impact. I think Jam could have a really good year, and nobody even talks about him. So I think, Jaheim Otis is set for a massive year. Deontay Lawson, if he comes around mentally at linebacker, I think can be a star on that defense. So the difference between Alabama this year and some other years is I think their strengths will be collective at certain positions, running back, receiver, DB, as opposed to having stars that go take over games like a Devonta Smith or a Quinnen Williams. They might not have many of those guys, but I think they may be better across the board at certain positions, and that depth's going to be able to help them. Quarterbacks, obviously, what you pay the most attention to and could potentially help them win a national title, keep them from winning a national title, but they're going to be in the mix either way. And with what LSU has coming back, maybe next to Ohio State, maybe ahead of Ohio State, the best receiving core in college football, they're either neck and neck or the best. With all 5 starters back on the offensive line, a starter, they have quarterback depth. With Nussmeier, you have 2 starting quarterbacks with that kind of ability there. Their defensive line is going to be solid. Mason Smith comes back. He was hurt against Florida State last year. He's going to be a monster. Mekhi Wingo, vastly underrated inside last year. And you've got a jack-of-all-trades, Swiss Army knife utility player in Harold Perkins that can wreck your game plan. So LSU's not taking a step back to anybody this season. They're going to be fun to watch. I think the most interesting thing to watch in the SEC is going to be that logjam in the West after those 2 teams, because I think you can make cases for A&M, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Auburn, Mississippi State. They all have things not to like, but they also have things to like. Yeah. Arkansas has got a generational quarterback, but it's a new offense with a new quarterback coach. I don't know if his weapons are as good, but he's got Rocket Sanders to hand the ball to, who's super dynamic. Ole Miss has the best running back returning in college football. They just picked up Jakari Franklin from UTSA. Their receiving core is going to be a strength again. They've massively upgraded at defensive line, and they bring Pete Golding in, who I think structurally is going to run a more sound defense. Mississippi State, veteran quarterback, veteran receivers, veteran offensive lineman, veteran defensive lineman. But, that's a complete 180 offensively than what they've been doing before. I don't know how that works. I don't know how that's going to look. So, and A&M's the most talented bunch of that group that we just mentioned, with a really good receiving core, really talented O-line and D-line, and a quarterback that has some experience. But, I don't know what the culture is going to allow them to be. But I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I don't know. But, they all have question marks. So, who can separate from that group, I think, is what's probably most interesting about the league this year.
Yeah. And you mentioned the offensive line, and they say this, man, I play offensive line too in high school. You played it too in college and everything, so the game is won in the trenches, man. I absolutely believe that, and so just speak, especially with your experience and everything you've seen in covering this game. How important it is having a sound, healthy offensive line, strong, how in run and pass game is important to a team.
It's so easy to show up. You look at go look at Kentucky last year, not having a great offensive line, how different they were on that side of the football. LSU first couple of games having to move their unit around, play different guys, how different they were late in the season when they actually had their starting five for multiple games in a row. Georgia's been dominant up front on the offensive line the last 2 years. What a difference that's made for them. Just because your group doesn't go out and destroy people on every play, if you're not a liability, it also makes a big difference. And I think that's what we forget sometimes is, having a porous offensive line can get your ass beat in a hurry. And whether you want to run the ball, throw the ball, it doesn't matter. If your quarterback's taking hits, if your back's getting hit in the backfield, like Tank Bigsby's an elite back, but there are a lot of times he couldn't really get going because he was getting hit in the backfield last year. So I still believe, because it's the closest proximity to the football to be able to prevent the game from being taken over or take the game over on the offense and defensive line. When you get an elite defensive lineman, it's a wrap. I mean, he can ruin your game plan in a hurry, and there's no way around it because he's that close to the ball. So I always believe games are won in the trenches, no matter if you're spread, hurry up, no huddle, pro style, wing T, it doesn't matter. I think that's where you win and lose football games.
Yep, that's right. That's right, man. The game is won in the trenches. You can't do anything else if you're offensive line. If you're not getting pressure defensively on the defensive line, if you're not making stops, in the run game, if you're not, like I said, rushing the passer, if you're not protecting your quarterback. They always say the teams that protect their quarterback the best and can rush the other quarterback, usually are the ones that end up winning, a good percentage of the time. So that's my whole thoughts on that there, man. But Cole, thank you again for your time and coming on the Jason Down podcast today. We appreciate your insight, man. Again, love your work on ESPN there. You guys do a great job, and we are excited for this upcoming season in college football.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Go check out the podcast Cube Show on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get it, at Cube Show 61 on YouTube. Subscribe to that thing. I appreciate all the help and appreciate hopping on with you today.
Yes, sir, man. You guys make sure you check him out there. Cole does a great job. Make sure you check out his work on this podcast. And you guys check us out here. Same thing, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, all these platforms. Check us out there, Cole. Thanks again, man. Have a great day.
All right, Jay. I appreciate it, man.
Of course.